The fragile peace the stars above New Haven Colony burned cold and steady, indifferent to the lives unfolding beneath them. On the surface of the planet, in a dome nestled between silver hills and glowing blue forests, a boy named Ben Carter ran through the orbital gardens with bare feet, laughing as he chased a floating drone shaped like a dragonfly. The drone beeped playfully and darted upward, weaving between hanging vines that dripped with morning dew. Ben was 10 years old, small for his age, with messy brown hair and eyes that always seemed to be searching for something new. He didn't know it, but he lived in one of the safest places in the known galaxy, not because of walls or weapons, but because of a rule everyone feared to break. That rule was called the first law of the galaxy: don't attack the human children. It had been written 20 standard cycles ago, after the brief but bloody conflict near Proxima Centauri. Back then, humanity had just begun reaching beyond their solar system. They had no ancient fleets, no inherited star maps, no council seats. They had only stubbornness, clever minds, and a terrifying willingness to fight for what they called home. When the Cathari tried to claim a human mining outpost, Earth didn't send diplomats first, they sent fighters. And when those fighters were outnumbered, they didn't retreat. They rigged asteroids to explode in chain reactions, turned comms satellites into signal jammers, and used old cargo haulers as suicide rams. The Cathari lost 3 dreadnoughts before they realized humans didn't fight like other species. They fought like cornered animals, fast, desperate, and without regard for their own survival. After that, the Galactic Council met in emergency session. The Varel argued for total quarantine. The Zenth warned that wiping out humanity would stain the galaxy's conscience forever. In the end, a compromise was reached. The Council recognized Earth's sovereignty over its colonies and trade routes, and in return, humanity agreed to abide by galactic law, mostly. But there was one condition the Council insisted on, whispered in hushed tones even among elders: never strike at human children. Not in war, not in punishment, not even by accident. Because if you hurt their young, the humans wouldn't just retaliate, they would burn the stars to ash to get justice. And so, peace held. Fragile, uneasy, but real. On New Haven, life moved at a gentle pace. The colony was mostly agricultural, designed to feed the outer rim settlements. Its population was small, just under 10,000 souls, and nearly half were under 18. Schools floated in low orbit, tethered to the main dome by magnetic rails. Playgrounds doubled as emergency shelters with soft floors that hardened during alerts. Every child wore a wristband that monitored vitals and location, not for control but for safety. The adults joked that the Council feared them more than they feared the void. Ben's older sister, Lisa, was 16 and already training with the Planetary Defense Cadets. She wasn't a soldier yet, but she spent her afternoons learning navigation, emergency protocols, and basic ship repair. She wore her dark hair in a tight braid and moved with a quiet confidence that made even the instructors nod in approval. She loved her brother fiercely, though she rarely said it. Instead, she showed it by checking his drone's flight path before he played, or by saving him the last piece of synth chocolate from the ration pack. "You're going to crash that thing into the hydroponics again," Lisa called from the garden's edge, arms crossed. Ben spun around, grinning. "It's not my fault the drone likes the lettuce." She shook her head but smiled. "Dad says dinner's in 10, and don't track mud inside this time." Their father, Paul Carter, worked in the colony's energy core, maintaining the fusion reactors that powered everything from the air recyclers to the school holoboards. He was a quiet man, with tired eyes and hands that always smelled faintly of ozone. He never talked about Earth, not really. But sometimes, when he thought no one was listening, he'd hum an old song from the American Southwest, a place none of them had ever seen. New Haven wasn't Earth, but it was home. Meanwhile, far beyond the colony's sensor range, in the gleaming halls of the Galactic Council chamber orbiting the gas giant Xylos, tensions simmered. The discovery of Void Crystal on Series 7 had thrown the Council into chaos. Void Crystal was rare, powerful, and essential for stable warp jumps. For centuries, it had been controlled by the Cathari and Varel, but now scans confirmed massive deposits beneath the surface of Series 7, a world legally granted to humanity after the Proxima Accords. High Arbiter Corlin, a Cathari elder with skin like polished obsidian and eyes that never blinked, stood before the Council. "The humans are children playing with fire," he said, his voice low and resonant. "They do not understand the balance. They hoard resources they cannot manage. They won it fairly," countered Elder Mela of the Zenth, her translucent wings shimmering with unease. To take it now would break the first law's spirit, if not its letter. The first law protects their young, not their greed, Corlin replied. If they refuse to share, they must be reminded of their place. The vote was close, but it passed. Not for open war, but for a precision demonstration. A strike on a minor colony. One with minimal military value, but high symbolic weight. New Haven was chosen not because it was strategic, but because it was soft. Full of children. A message, not a battle. Back on New Haven, Ben finally caught his drone. He held it gently in his palms, its wings still buzzing softly. He looked up at the dome's transparent ceiling, where stars blinked like distant promises. He didn't know that 3 Council warships were already dropping out of warp at the system's edge. He didn't know that the orbital defense grid had been quietly sabotaged by agents posing as trade inspectors. He didn't know that in less than an hour, plasma warheads would rain down on his home. All he knew was that the garden smelled like rain. His sister was waiting, and dinner was almost ready. Peace, after all, is just the quiet before someone decides to break it. The Council's betrayal, the sky over New Haven had always been calm. Even during solar storms, the dome's shields hummed softly, turning dangerous radiation into harmless light shows that painted the clouds in gentle greens and purples. But that evening the hum stopped. Not with a bang, not with a warning, just silence. The lights in the orbital gardens flickered once, then died. Ben Carter froze, the dragonfly drone slipping from his fingers. Around him the vines stopped swaying. The air recyclers fell quiet. Even the birds in the biodome went still. Lisa felt it too. She was in the cadet training bay, practicing emergency seal procedures on a mock airlock when the lights dimmed. The instructor's voice cut off mid-sentence. Outside the window, the colony's defense satellites, usually bright dots moving in slow, steady patterns, blinked out one by one. Power failure? Someone asked. No, Lisa said, her voice tight. This is something else, she ran. Not to the command center, not to the comms room, but to the gardens. To Ben above the planet, 3 Council warships hung in the void like black knives. They bore no markings, no flags, no identification codes. They had disabled New Haven's grid using a virus slipped into the last trade shipment from a Varel freighter. Now with the colony blind and defenseless, they opened fire. The first plasma warhead struck the eastern dome. It wasn't aimed at the reactor, the comms tower, or the shipyard. It hit the primary school. Children were still inside, finishing their lessons, drawing pictures of Earth's oceans, laughing over shared snacks. The blast vaporized the structure instantly. The shockwave cracked the main dome's inner membrane. Alarms finally blared, but too late. Ben didn't see the explosion. He only heard the sound, a deep, wet crack like the sky tearing open. Then the ground shook. Lisa reached him just as the second warhead hit the medical wing. She grabbed his arm and pulled him toward the nearest shelter tunnel. Around them, people screamed, ran, fell. A woman carrying a baby tripped and dropped her child. Lisa wanted to stop, but Ben was trembling, and the tunnel entrance was closing. They made it inside just as the third strike hit the central plaza. The shelter sealed with a hiss, plunging them into red emergency light. Ben's face was streaked with dirt and tears. What's happening? He whispered. Lisa didn't answer. She pressed her ear to the wall and listened to the distant thunder of more impacts. Not military targets. The playground. The youth dormitory. The nursery. The council wasn't trying to win a battle. They were sending a message. In the council chamber, High Arbiter Corlin watched the live feed from New Haven with cold satisfaction. They will understand now, he said. Humans respond only to pain. Elder Maella of the Zenth stood slowly, her wings drooping. You attacked children, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. You broke the first law. The law was a mistake, Corlin replied. It made them bold. Now they will learn fear. But fear was not what spread through the human colonies that night. It was silence. On Earth, in the United Planetary Command Center beneath the Rocky Mountains, General Elena Cruz stared at the casualty report. Over 2,000 dead. 83% under the age of 18. No soldiers, no weapons factories. Just homes, schools, gardens. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She simply turned off the screen and walked to the comms array. Broadcast this, she said to the technician. All frequencies. All languages. No encryption. The message was short. Only 8 words. You broke your own law. Then every human ship, station, and colony went dark. Trade routes shut down. Diplomatic channels closed. Even civilian freighters powered down their transponders and vanished into the void. The galaxy held its breath. Back in the shelter on New Haven, Lisa held Ben close. The air was thick with the smell of sweat and fear. Some children cried. Others sat in stunned silence. A cadet named Jake, barely older than Lisa, tried to patch a girl's bleeding arm with torn fabric. Water rationing began immediately. Power was limited to life support only. Hours passed. Then a soft chime echoed through the tunnel. The emergency hatch opened just enough to let in a small service bot, its arms full of nutrient packs and medkits. It beeped twice, the colony's rescue protocol. Someone was still alive on the surface. Lisa stood. "I'm going out." "You can't," Jake said. "Radiation levels are high, and the council might still be watching. They wanted to break us," Lisa said, strapping on a spare breather mask. "But they forgot something." "What?" Ben asked, looking up at her with wide eyes. "We don't break easy." She stepped into the ruined dome. The sky was orange with smoke. Buildings were skeletons of twisted metal, but in the distance she saw movement. Survivors digging through rubble, dragging stretchers, sharing water. The colony's backup generator had kicked on in Sector 7. A weak signal pulsed from the old observatory. A human-made beacon, repeating a simple code. "Help is coming." Meanwhile, aboard a hidden station near Titan, a quiet engineer named Danny Ross watched the same footage as the rest of humanity. He hadn't spoken in 3 days. He just stared at the image of a melted toy lying in the ashes of a classroom. Then he stood, walked to his workshop, and activated a prototype he'd been told to abandon. It was a device that didn't destroy ships or cities. It targeted something deeper, something the Council relied on more than weapons. Empathy, because the Council thought humans were children. But children remember, and children learn. As night fell on New Haven, Ben sat by a cracked window in the shelter, watching the stars. One of them flickered strangely. Not a star, a ship, human, not military, civilian. It descended slowly, landing in what used to be the central plaza. The hatch opened and men and women in plain gray suits stepped out, carrying medkits and tools. They didn't wear uniforms. They didn't carry guns. They just started helping. Lisa returned with a rescued toddler in her arms. She placed the child gently beside Ben. "Keep her warm," she said. Ben nodded. He wrapped his jacket around the little girl and hummed the same song his father sometimes sang, the one about deserts and rivers and home. Far away in the council chamber, Corlin received a new report. Human activity had not ceased. It had changed, and something worse than war was coming, because the humans hadn't declared revenge. They had declared judgment. The human response. After the silence came the shift. For days, the galaxy waited for Earth to scream, to launch fleets, to burn council worlds and return. But no warships jumped into Varel space. No missiles streaked toward Cathari homeworlds. Instead, something quieter happened, something stranger. Human freighters stopped docking at neutral ports. Human scientists ceased sharing medical data. Human artists pulled their work from galactic archives. It was as if humanity had drawn a curtain around itself, not in fear, but in judgment. On New Haven, recovery moved slowly. Rescue teams from Mars and Europa arrived in unmarked ships, bringing clean water, prefab shelters, and trauma counselors who spoke softly and listened more than they talked. Lisa worked with them daily, helping to identify the dead, comfort the lost, and rebuild what could be saved. Ben stayed close to her, his once bright eyes now shadowed. But he helped too, carrying supplies, holding hands, sharing his rations with younger kids who wouldn't eat alone. Meanwhile, deep in the outer solar system, where sunlight was just a memory, Danny Ross finished his work. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't even part of the military. He was a sound engineer who used to design concert halls on Earth before moving to Titan to study ice harmonics. But after seeing the footage from New Haven, the melted toys, the empty classrooms, the list of names that never stopped growing, he stopped sleeping. He remembered how his niece used to laugh when he played her lullabies through resonant crystals. Now she was gone, buried under rubble on a world she'd never even seen. So he built the empathy disruptor. It didn't fire lasers or missiles. It sent out a low-frequency pulse, tuned to the neural patterns of non-human species. The Cathari, the Varel, the Zenth. They all shared a biological trait. Their moral decisions were guided by a shared emotional field, a kind of instinctive empathy that kept their societies stable. Without it, they became confused, selfish, even violent. The device didn't hurt them. It just turned off the part of their brain that said this is wrong. Danny tested it on a captured Varel scout drone. Within seconds, the drone's crew began arguing over trivial things: fuel rations, seating order, who last cleaned the air filter. Then they started fighting. The drone crashed into an asteroid, not from damage but from chaos. Earth Command approved the plan, not as a weapon but as a mirror. The first strike wasn't on a planet. It was on a Council supply convoy near the Orion Arm. 3 human stealth corvettes, small, fast, painted black, slipped past patrols and activated their disruptors. The effect was immediate. Aboard the Cathari freighter, officers turned on each other. One accused another of hoarding food. A third drew a sidearm over a misaligned cargo manifest. Within minutes, the convoy was dead in space, its crew locked in senseless conflict. News spread fast. Panic followed. On the Council homeworld, High Arbiter Corlin demanded answers. How can a sound break minds? He roared during an emergency session. It doesn't break minds, Elder Mayella said quietly. It reveals what's underneath. Without empathy, your people are no different than the humans you called savages. Corlin ordered all non-essential travel halted. Empathy shielding was rushed into production. But it was slow, expensive, and unreliable. Worse, trust began to crumble. Firel merchants refused to trade with Cathari buyers. Zenth diplomats stopped attending council meetings. Rumors spread that Earth had infected the galaxy with a madness plague. But Earth said nothing. They just kept watching. On New Haven, Lisa received new orders. She was to join a covert team aboard the rescue vessel Persephone. Tasked with sweeping the outer ruins for survivors the first wave missed. Ben begged to come. At first, Lisa refused, but then she saw the look in his eyes. Not fear, but purpose. And she remembered what their father always said: when the world breaks, you don't hide. You help fix it. So Ben came along. The Persephone was not a warship. It was an old medical frigate, retrofitted with extra scanners and reinforced hull plating. Its captain, a woman named Claire Mills, had lost her own son in the strike. She didn't speak much, but her hands were steady, and her eyes missed nothing. As they flew over the scarred surface of New Haven, Ben sat at the sensor station, watching thermal readings flicker across the screen. Most shelters were empty, but one, deep in Sector 9, the old science wing, showed faint heat signatures. Someone's alive down there, Ben said. Lisa suited up immediately. The team landed near the collapsed dome, using sonic cutters to slice through twisted metal. Inside, they found 12 children huddled in a storage closet, surviving on emergency rations and hope. One of them, a boy no older than 6, clung to a stuffed bear with one eye missing. As they carried the kids to the ship, Ben noticed something odd. The Council warships had hovered directly over the nursery before firing. Not just bombing, it was deliberate, precise, like they wanted to be seen. Back on the Persephone, he mentioned it to Claire. She didn't answer right away. Then she said, they wanted to scare us, but they forgot we've been scared before, and we always come back. That night, Ben couldn't sleep. He wandered to the ship's observation deck and stared at the stars. One of them pulsed oddly. Not a star, a Council patrol. But instead of attacking, the human crew just watched. Waited. Because the real weapon wasn't the disruptor. It was patience. And humanity had plenty of that. As the Persephone returned to orbit, a new message arrived from Earth Command. Short, clear, final. Prepare for Phase 2. Lisa read it and nodded. Ben didn't ask what it meant. He already knew. The Council broke the first law. Now humanity would make sure no one ever forgot why it existed. Reckoning among the stars, the Council was falling apart from the inside. Ships that once flew in perfect formation now drifted apart, their crews too distrustful to share coordinates. Trade routes froze. Embassies closed. Even the Zenth, who had always preached unity, began pulling their fleets back to their own borders. Without empathy, the glue that held galactic society together had dissolved. Arguments turned into fights. Fights turned into mutinies. And through it all, humanity watched, silent and steady, like a storm gathering just beyond the horizon. High Arbiter Corlin refused to accept defeat. He gathered what remained of the Loyalist fleet, mostly Varel warships and a few hardened Cathari dreadnoughts, and declared a final strike. Not on a colony this time, on Earth itself. He believed if he crushed the human homeworld, the rest would surrender. He didn't understand that humans didn't break that way. Earth Command knew the attack was coming. They had been waiting for it. Instead of fortifying the inner system, they did something unexpected. They emptied it. Civilian ships vanished into the asteroid belt. Military bases went dark. Even the orbital docks near Mars were abandoned. To the Council scouts, it looked like panic, like retreat, but it was a trap. The human fleet didn't gather near Jupiter or Saturn. They hid in the Oort cloud, far beyond the edge of the solar system, among trillions of icy rocks and ancient debris. There in the frozen dark waited not just warships, but something older, mining drones. For over a century, humans had sent autonomous machines into the Oort cloud to harvest ice and rare minerals. Most were small, no bigger than a shuttle built to work in silence for decades. Now they had been reprogrammed. Lisa stood on the bridge of the Persephone, now fitted with light armor and sensor jammers. She wasn't a cadet anymore. She wore the insignia of a junior tactical officer. Ben was with her, not as a passenger, but as a systems assistant. His knowledge of harmonic frequencies, learned from playing with garden drones and listening to his father's old songs, had proven useful. He could hear patterns in static that others missed. "They're coming," Captain Claire said, her voice calm. "Corlin's flagship leads the vanguard. He's arrogant. He thinks we're hiding. He doesn't know about the swarm," Lisa replied. The swarm was the mining drones, over 10,000 of them, scattered across millions of kilometers of space. Each carried a small disruptor pulse and a kinetic harpoon. Alone, they were harmless. Together, they were a storm. As the Council Armada crossed into the outer system, the first drone activated. It didn't attack. It just pinged, a soft repeating tone that mimicked a distress signal. Another drone answered, then another. Soon the entire cloud was humming with false echoes, confusing the Council's sensors. Corlin ordered his ships forward. "Do not be fooled by tricks," he broadcast. "Burn through the noise." That was when the real attack began. The drones swarmed like angry bees. They didn't fire lasers. They slammed into hulls, latched on, and overloaded their own power cores. Small explosions cracked armor. Comms arrays shattered. Shield generators flickered and died. Worse, each drone carried a miniaturized empathy disruptor. As they attached to the Council ships, the pulses flooded the bridges. On Corlin's flagship, the crew turned on each other. One officer accused another of leaking battle plans. A navigator refused to follow orders, claiming the course would lead them into a black hole. Two Marines drew weapons over who got the last ration pack. Chaos spread faster than fire. Meanwhile, the human fleet struck from the shadows, not with overwhelming force, but with precision. They targeted engines, not bridges. Weapons, not life support. They wanted the Council ships disabled, not destroyed. They wanted survivors. Aboard the Persephone, Ben watched the battle unfold on the main screen. He saw a Varel cruiser spin out of control after its thrusters exploded. He saw a Cathari destroyer power down, its crew too confused to fight. But something bothered him. The disruptors were working too well. Even the Zenth ships who had tried to stay neutral were affected. "We're hurting the wrong ones too," he said quietly. Lisa looked at him. "What do you mean?" "The pulse doesn't know who's guilty," Ben said. "It just turns off empathy for everyone. Even the ones who tried to help us," Claire overheard. She paused, then nodded slowly. "You're right." She turned to the comms officer. "Patch Ben into the main harmonic array. Give him full control." Ben didn't hesitate. He sat at the console, closed his eyes, and listened. Beneath the roar of battle, he heard the unique resonance of each ship, the hum of Cathari engines, the buzz of Varel shields, the gentle chime of Zenth navigation systems. He remembered how his father used to tune old radios by ear, finding the clearest frequency through noise. He began adjusting the disruptor's output, not a blanket pulse anymore, a targeted one. He shaped the signal like a song, weaving through the chaos, hitting only the warships that had fired on New Haven. The Zenth vessels suddenly stabilized. Their crews blinked, as if waking from a dream. They saw what was happening, and turned their weapons on the Varel. Corlin's flagship was the last to fall. Its bridge was in ruins, its crew fighting in the dark. Corlin himself stood alone in the command chamber, staring at the view screen as human ships closed in. He expected death. Instead, a message appeared. "Surrender, or your own people will finish what we started." He looked around. His first officer pointed a weapon at him. His navigator had locked the helm. Even his personal guard stepped back. In the end, he didn't fight. He opened the comms and said one word: "Mercy." The human fleet accepted. As the battle ended, Ben looked out at the silent stars. The Oort cloud was quiet again. The drones powered down, drifting back into the dark like ghosts. The Council Armada was gone, not destroyed but broken, and somewhere far below, on a wounded planet called Earth, children were still sleeping. Safe. For now. A new covenant. The war was over, but the healing had just begun. On New Haven, the sky was clear again. The dome had been patched, the gardens replanted, and the schools rebuilt, this time with thicker walls and deeper shelters. But no one forgot. Children still flinched at sudden noises. Adults spoke softly near playgrounds, and every evening at sunset, a bell rang once from the central tower, a sound for those who never came home. Ben Carter stood in the memorial garden, his hands dirty from digging. He placed a young sapling into the soil, patted the earth around it, and stepped back. This was the 217th tree, one for each child lost in the strike. The trees were a mix oak, pine, cherry species from Earth that had never grown on New Haven before. They were stubborn, slow to root, but strong once they took hold, like humans. Lisa joined him, her uniform now bearing a new patch, a small silver hand holding a star. She didn't say anything at first. She just stood beside him, watching the leaves tremble in the breeze. "They're calling it the second law," she said finally. Ben nodded. He'd heard the broadcasts. After the battle in the Oort cloud, the Galactic Council had been reformed. The Varel were stripped of voting rights. High Arbiter Corlin was exiled to a silent moon with no comms, no visitors, just his thoughts and the stars. The Zenth, along with several younger species who had long been ignored, now had equal seats. And the new law was simple. Harm to the innocent shall be answered not with vengeance but with justice. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. On Earth, the United Planetary Council had refused to take revenge. They didn't demand reparations, territory, or executions. They only asked for one thing: that the first law be honored not just in words, but in action, and that any species who broke it would face judgment, not from weapons, but from the galaxy itself. The empathy disruptors were dismantled. Danny Ross, the quiet engineer from Titan, turned his workshop into a school, teaching young humans how sound could heal as well as harm. He built instruments that helped trauma survivors sleep. He even sent a set of harmonic chimes to the Zenth as a gift. They hung them in their council chamber, where their soft tones reminded everyone to listen before they acted. Meanwhile, the Persephone remained in orbit around New Haven, now serving as a mobile hospital and school. Captain Claire Mills adopted 3 of the orphaned children from Sector 9. Ben visited them often, bringing books and old drone parts to tinker with. He taught them how to tune frequencies, how to find calm in noise, how to remember without being broken by it. One afternoon, as he walked back from the ship, he saw a group of alien children near the edge of the colony. They were Zenth, small with shimmering skin and wide, curious eyes. Their parents had come as part of a goodwill mission, bringing seeds from their homeworld to plant beside the human trees. At first, the human kids kept their distance, but then one of the Zenth girls held out a glowing flower. Ben's little sister, now 5, born after the strike, walked forward and took it. She smiled. The Zenth girl smiled back. No words were needed. Back on the council station orbiting Xylos, Elder Mayella stood before the newly assembled chamber. Representatives from over 30 species watched as she placed a small data crystal on the central table. Inside was a recording, not of war but of a human classroom on New Haven just days after the attack. Children were singing. Their voices were shaky, some still hoarse from smoke, but they sang together, a simple song about stars and home and never giving up. "This is what we almost lost," Mayla said. "Not just humans, hope." The chamber was silent. Then, one by one, the delegates rose and bowed their heads. Even the Varel ambassador, now stripped of rank but allowed to observe, turned away ashamed. On New Haven, Paul Carter stood at the edge of the memorial garden, watching his children. Lisa was teaching cadets how to repair shield emitters. Ben was showing a group of kids how to calibrate a garden drone. His wife, gone years before the strike, would have been proud. He hummed her favorite song, the one about rivers and deserts. And for the first time in a long time, it didn't hurt to remember. Humanity had not become what the Council feared. They had not turned cruel. They had not burned the galaxy down. Instead, they had shown something rare: strength with mercy, grief with grace, and justice without hatred. Other young species took notice. The krill, the maishi, the orlan, they began reaching out to Earth asking for teachers for trade for friendship. They saw that being young didn't mean being weak. It meant you still believed in better days, and so slowly, the galaxy changed. Not because of weapons or laws alone, but because a boy planted trees, a girl taught others to fix what was broken, and a quiet engineer chose to build instead of destroy. The first law still stood: don't attack the human children. But now, everyone understood why. It wasn't because humans would retaliate with fire. It was because they would respond with something far more powerful: truth. And in the end, truth was the one thing even the stars could not hide from.